They said the footage would change nothing, that it was just another comet, another icy wanderer from deep space. But when the new video of 3I Atlas was released by NASA on a quiet Tuesday night, the scientific community fell silent. What they saw on those frames didn't fit any known model of celestial mechanics, 3I Atlas. The mysterious interstellar object that had once passed through our solar system was back in focus, and this time it wasn't just drifting. It was moving with intent. The first anomaly came from the Pan-STARRS Observatory in Hawaii. Its deep-field instruments recorded a strange rotational pattern. Instead of a smooth spin, the object's axis shifted mid-rotation, correcting itself as though stabilizing from an internal force. A natural object cannot do that. For days, astronomers debated whether this was an imaging error. Yet, as other observatories from Chile, Japan, and Spain confirmed the same movement, the explanation grew thin. "We're watching something adjust itself," said Dr. Leland Joe from Caltech. "It's not tumbling randomly, it's controlling its spin." At first, NASA attempted to explain it away. Their public statement mentioned unusual outgassing events, small jets of sublimating ice supposedly pushing the comet into motion. But independent scientists quickly noticed the direction of the thrust. It wasn't chaotic. The jets, if that's what they were, fired in symmetrical intervals like bursts of precision-guided propulsion. Then came the light pulses. Amateur astronomers studying slowed-down video noticed rhythmic flashes on the comet's shadowed side, faint but measurable. Each pulse lasted less than 0.3 seconds. When plotted on a timeline, they formed a repeating pattern, like Morse code. The timing was too deliberate, too consistent to be random noise. Online forums erupted overnight. Was 3I Atlas transmitting something? NASA's communication channels went silent the next morning. The original footage disappeared from their website, replaced with a revised version, showing heavy pixel distortion where the pulses had appeared. But the internet had already archived the raw file. It spread through Reddit, astrophotography circles, and encrypted Telegram channels faster than any official denial could stop it. Analysis began within hours. A small data research group in Finland discovered that the intervals between flashes matched the Fibonacci sequence. Another, in Canada, converted the flashes into binary and found repeating headers consistent with structured data packets. The result: incomplete but coherent information, suggesting encoding, not randomness. For the first time, scientists publicly admitted that 3I Atlas might not be entirely natural. Dr. Joe gave a short interview to the BBC. "We are dealing with an object that behaves like a probe. Whether it's active, ancient, or something else I can't say, but it's interacting with forces that no natural comet should." Meanwhile, the European Space Agency released its own images from the Gaia telescope. They showed that 3I Atlas had subtly changed course by less than 1 degree, but enough to alter its trajectory closer toward the inner solar system. It wasn't falling toward the sun. It was aligning. Social media exploded with speculation. Conspiracy theorists flooded the web, claiming it was alien. Others insisted it was a classified project, some secret Earth-made probe sent decades ago and now returning home. A few fringe researchers suggested something stranger, that 3I Atlas had been asleep and the solar radiation had reawakened it. Then came the leak. A supposed insider from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory posted a series of encrypted messages claiming the footage contained missing frames NASA intentionally cropped out before release. When those frames were reconstructed using color spectrum analysis, faint shapes became visible under the comet's frozen crust, sharp angles, hexagonal patterns, and what looked like metallic reflections. The scientific community split in two. One half refused to believe, calling it digital, the human tendency to see order and chaos. The other half whispered behind closed doors, because even if the patterns were illusions, something about the data felt wrong. 2 weeks later, a new batch of images was uploaded to a European database, this time from the Hubble relay. In high contrast, the surface of 3I Atlas revealed geometric depressions resembling panels or vents. Spectrographic readings detected traces of an alloy not found in known meteorites. "It's a composition we can't replicate easily," said an anonymous material scientist in an interview later pulled offline. By mid-July, the official story began to shift. NASA quietly stopped calling it a comet. Their press materials now described it as an interstellar body of uncertain origin. No further public images were released, and yet telescopes around the world continued to track it. Something about its motion had changed. It was no longer accelerating along its original path. Instead, it seemed to be slowing down, as if preparing to stop. Astronomers tried to model the deceleration but couldn't explain it. Natural drag from solar wind was far too weak. The final piece of footage released before total blackout came from an amateur observatory in Argentina. The video, time-stamped 02.4611 UTC, shows the object rotating once, then pausing. For almost 3 seconds, it appeared perfectly still, a frozen point of light before continuing its spin, but at a slower rate. That 3-second pause ignited a new wave of panic. "Comets don't stop," Dr. Joe repeated during his last public statement. "Physics doesn't pause, something else is at play here." After that, he disappeared from the media circuit. Since then, no official updates have been made. The most recent amateur observations show 3I Atlas holding a stable position relative to Earth's orbit, an impossible phenomenon that defies every known law of motion. The footage remains online, dissected by millions, analysed frame by frame. In every version, at the 30-second mark, a faint pulse still flashes from its surface, repeating once every 17 seconds, steady, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. They called it the second transmission because no one wanted to admit what the first one had already done. The first signal from 3I Atlas had left half of the scientific community in shock and the other half in denial. It was faint, rhythmic and structured, like something counting. But the second one was different. It wasn't faint. It wasn't distant. It was directed. The data came in from 3 observatories at once: Mauna Kea in Hawaii, La Palma in the Canary Islands, and Paranal in Chile. All 3 picked up the same modulation pattern, a sequence of pulses that didn't match any known natural radio or magnetic phenomenon. It wasn't random noise. It wasn't interference. The pattern repeated every 61 seconds, and within that pattern there was a pulse shift that perfectly mirrored the rotation of the comet's nucleus. Someone, or something, was synchronizing the emission to its spin. The teams tried to dismiss it as a data error, but the confirmation came from the Deep Space Network 2 hours later. The signal was real, and it wasn't coming from Earth. Every monitoring station locked in on the source, and when they cross-referenced coordinates, they found it was locked precisely to 3I Atlas's core. Not its tail, not its debris, the core itself. That was when the headlines began. 3I Atlas, the first artificial comet. Signal detected from interstellar object. The panic grew faster than the data could be processed. At NASA, a small group of researchers formed what they called the Atlas Contingency Team. Their mission: figure out whether this was a natural anomaly or something deliberately engineered. The team's lead analyst, Dr. Karen Duvall, published an internal memo that would later be leaked. In it, she wrote, "The spectral composition of the emission suggests a modulation bandwidth inconsistent with any known plasma or dust-induced resonance. It's as if someone is sending a message using the magnetic field itself." When the footage came in from the Japanese Subaru telescope, the world saw it for the first time. The comet wasn't dim anymore. Its nucleus glowed in distinct geometric flashes, like hexagonal panels lighting up in sequence. The shape wasn't perfectly natural. It seemed to have edges, angles, and an almost mechanical rhythm. Duvall's team slowed down the frames and ran them through spectral analysis. The results were impossible to explain through known physics. The light pulses contained harmonic intervals that corresponded to prime numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, repeating in cycles. No comet should emit prime sequences of light. It wasn't random. It was intentional. Then came the audio translation. Not sound in the normal sense, but frequency compression that converted the electromagnetic signals into audible ranges. The result was a deep pulsating resonance, almost like a heartbeat mixed with static. People online started calling it the Atlas Pulse. For the first few hours it was just another viral mystery. But then the data feed from the European Southern Observatory began showing fluctuations, as if 3I Atlas was responding to being observed. When telescopes turned toward it, the signal shifted slightly. When they turned away, it returned to baseline. It was reacting. Someone on the data team described it as looking back. Then suddenly, all transmissions ceased. For 27 minutes, every receiver on Earth picked up nothing. Total silence, then a burst, a single pulse. But this time, the data packet embedded within the burst wasn't just noise. It was encoded in a binary structure matching an early form of Earth's telemetry data, the kind used by Voyager probes in the 1970s. Within that code was a compressed image file. When decoded, it showed a blurry rendering, a spherical shape, half-lit, surrounded by fine dust, and at the centre, a reflection. It looked like Earth, viewed through static. Duvall wrote one final note before the Atlas data portal was locked by government directive. It read, "If this is communication, then it's not random. It knows we're watching. It's mirroring us." After that, the project went completely dark. No updates, no statements. The observatories involved were ordered to redirect their scopes elsewhere. Unofficially, some data analysts continued tracking what they could. They claimed the signal reappeared 3 days later, not from space, but from the upper ionosphere, as if 3i Atlas wasn't just watching anymore. It was transmitting back. It started as a rumour among the astronomers, whispers that 3i Atlas had slowed again, not by a fraction of a percent, but drastically. The first calculations seemed impossible. Something the size of a small moon had reduced its speed by 38% in less than 12 hours without disintegrating. That violated every known law of celestial mechanics. Comets don't break. But 3i Atlas wasn't behaving like a comet anymore. It was acting like something under control. On February 9th, 0413 UTC, a sudden electromagnetic burst reached the Deep Space Network's Goldstone complex. The signal saturated the receivers, overwhelming their filters with a burst pattern identical to the Atlas pulse from weeks before. The technicians froze as they watched the feed realign itself and then vanish. Seconds later, an optical telescope in Chile caught the first images. The comet's trajectory had shifted. It was no longer on a stable elliptical path. It was turning. Not a gravitational deviation, a maneuver. Something had adjusted its vector directly toward Earth. The calculations sparked chaos inside every observatory's control room. NASA, ESA, JAXA all went into emergency coordination mode. Yet the strangest part wasn't that it was approaching. It was how. Instead of accelerating toward the Sun, 3i Atlas appeared to be matching Earth's orbit, stabilizing, as if preparing for synchronous motion. The comet's light pattern changed again, but this time the hexagonal flares didn't blink in sequences of prime numbers. They pulsed in clusters, 3s, 8s, and 13s. Some analysts noticed something uncanny. Those sequences matched timestamps of major human broadcasts, the times when global radio transmissions were strongest. It was as if the object had been listening. The footage that came from the Hubble relay that week was later classified, but fragments leaked through private astronomy forums. The frames showed a glowing object with a defined metallic reflection on one side, resembling a lattice or scaffolding. That surface wasn't made of ice or rock. It had symmetry. One technician described it anonymously as looking like folded wings. When the press got wind of the story, the official response was predictable. No evidence supports the claim that 3i Atlas has changed trajectory or composition. But that denial came 2 hours after every amateur astronomer could see the shift with their own tracking software. The internet exploded with synchronized reports. A Harvard astrophysicist posted a single sentence before his account disappeared. The object has entered controlled descent. By then, 3 Atlas was visible to the naked eye from the southern hemisphere, glowing green against the night sky, brighter than Venus. The media called it the Emerald Visitor. Its surface shimmered irregularly, like the light was coming from within rather than reflecting the sun. And then came the storms. Around the same time the comet slowed to half its previous velocity, Earth's magnetic field registered an unprecedented disturbance, a pulse wave strong enough to disrupt GPS satellites and scramble long-range radio. The anomaly lasted only 21 seconds, but left behind something measurable, a repeating rhythmic signature in the ionosphere, mimicking the original Atlas pulse, as if Earth itself was now resonating back. Meanwhile, a Norwegian weather satellite captured something that no one could explain. A circular distortion formed in the upper atmosphere directly below the projected point where 3i Atlas would cross Earth's orbital plane. It wasn't visible to the human eye, only in infrared. The anomaly was 42 kilometers wide, and it was moving. The circular zone pulsed once every 61 seconds, the same rhythm as the comet's earlier signals. Dr. Karen Duvall, whose previous warnings had been buried, reappeared in an online conference that night. Her voice was steady, but her words were chilling. It's synchronizing. Whatever it is, it's not falling randomly. It's aligning. Over the next days, power fluctuations were reported across Europe and South America. Instruments measuring cosmic rays detected spikes in patterns identical to the original Atlas sequences. Something was linking the object to Earth's own electromagnetic field. Governments began issuing statements about solar interference and geomagnetic anomalies. But by then, the footage told another story. Amateur astronomers in Argentina recorded the most shocking sequence yet, the moment the comet's core split open. For 4 seconds, the nucleus separated into 2 perfectly symmetrical halves, emitting a flash that saturated cameras and sensors. Then, just as quickly, the halves folded inward, sealing themselves. From that point forward, the light from 3I Atlas changed colour, from emerald green to a deep pulsing blue. Analysts described the shift as consistent with energy output from ionized hydrogen, but no known comet could produce that at such scale. As the object neared the exosphere, radar systems worldwide began reporting echoes, faint reflections appearing behind it as though something massive but invisible was following. The phenomenon was dubbed the Atlas Echo. No one could determine if it was debris, plasma distortion, or something else entirely. By the time the world realized it wasn't slowing anymore, it was too late. 3I Atlas had stopped 800 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean, not crashed, stopped, perfectly stationary. And from that moment on, the Atlas pulse wasn't just coming from the sky, it was coming from the ground, the sea, and every magnetic sensor on Earth. When 3I Atlas stopped, the world changed in ways no one had imagined possible. For the first time in recorded history, an interstellar object, something born beyond our solar system, had not only entered Earth's vicinity, but achieved perfect geostationary position. 8 and 12 kilometers above the Pacific, directly over the equator, it hovered motionless. Every sensor on Earth began registering anomalies within seconds. Gravity didn't fluctuate, yet something felt wrong. Compasses wavered. Birds migrated in confused patterns. Even ocean currents shifted slightly, as if responding to a new invisible tide. Governments across the globe activated emergency communication networks. The White House, the Kremlin, and Beijing's Central Command all issued statements denying any contact. But satellite data leaked anyway. 3I Atlas wasn't inert. It was emitting low-frequency pulses, one every 61 seconds, synchronized perfectly with Earth's magnetic north. The signal wasn't random, it had structure. And then came the sound. At 02:47 UTC, hydrophones across the Pacific detected a faint but distinct vibration coming from below. The sound matched the frequency of the Atlas pulse, but inverted. That meant there wasn't just a signal from above Earth. There was a response from beneath. The ocean itself seemed to echo. Scientists from NOAA and the European Space Agency were the first to confirm it publicly. They called it subharmonic resonance. But others, including independent researchers and radio amateurs, pointed out something more disturbing. The pulse originated exactly where the object was hovering above, a point in the Pacific known as Point Nemo, the most remote spot on the planet, the so-called spacecraft graveyard. For decades, that location had been where decommissioned satellites and space stations were directed to crash. And now, something deep beneath it was answering a message from the stars. Within 24 hours, thousands of recordings of the Atlas hum began circulating online. People claimed to hear it even without instruments. A low, steady vibration felt through the ground or inside their chests. Hospitals reported an increase in patients complaining of heart palpitations and dizziness. Animals reacted violently. Whales altered their migration paths. Dolphins stranded themselves in record numbers. Still, 3I Atlas didn't move. It pulsed, steady as a heartbeat, while light rippled across its surface, waves of blue and green like auroras in motion. Amateur telescopes captured strange geometric shadows forming beneath its hull, like shifting patterns or glyphs. Linguists tried to interpret them, but no language matched. They weren't symbols, they were coordinates, and the coordinates pointed downward. At 8:22 UTC, a seismic anomaly occurred directly beneath Point Nemo. Not an earthquake, but a harmonic oscillation. Deep-sea sensors recorded a frequency wave resonating through the crust at a constant amplitude. It was artificial. Something was awakening beneath the ocean floor. Military vessels from multiple nations converged on the location, though none admitted it. Satellite images showed at least 7 submarines forming a perimeter around the site. Civilian GPS navigation systems were disabled within a 2,000-kilometre radius. The area became a blackout zone. But the blackout didn't stop the broadcasts. Amateur radio operators around the world intercepted coded signals, long bursts of binary, embedded in the same frequency band as the Atlas pulse. When decoded, the data revealed repeating sequences that formed a 3-dimensional map. The structure resembled both the Earth's magnetic field and the internal blueprint of the comet itself. In other words, whatever was above the Pacific was communicating with what was below. On February 13th, the signal intensified. Ocean temperature sensors registered a sudden rise, not just at the surface, but deep at the Mariana Trench. The anomaly extended 700 kilometers wide, centered precisely under 3I Atlas. That night, for the first time since the object's arrival, its light dimmed. The G-low subsided into a faint pulsating green core, and then silence. Every radio, telescope and radar system fell quiet. For nearly 9 minutes the Earth seemed still. Then the ocean erupted. A column of water nearly 3 kilometers high burst upward from the surface, followed by a sphere of vapor glowing with electric discharge. Inside that vapor, cameras captured an outline. Metallic, symmetrical, enormous. Not a natural formation, a structure. Witnesses on nearby ships described it as a dark mirror rising from the depths. Within seconds the column collapsed and the ocean boiled with residual energy. But the readings confirmed it. An object had emerged from beneath the Earth's crust, its mass 0.4 of the Moon. Impossible, yet real. The pulse resumed, only now it came from 2 sources, one above, one below. The resonance between them formed standing waves in the atmosphere, visible even to the naked eye as luminous rings expanding across the Pacific sky. The following morning, every magnetic compass in the southern hemisphere pointed 5 degrees off true north. Satellites began to fail, not from impact but from interference, as if the very geometry of space around 3I Atlas had changed. Governments declared an astronomical anomaly event and shut down civilian tracking. But among leaked recordings from the Deep Space Network, one line from a scientist stood out. "It's not just here to observe, it's activating something that's been waiting." And as the twin pulses stabilized, every seismic monitor on Earth began to hum at the same frequency, 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet. Somehow, 3I Atlas had synchronized itself with Earth, not just orbitally, biologically, electromagnetically, and geologically. And if that was true, the question was no longer what it wanted, it was what it had awakened. The world didn't sleep that night. Every global network, every station, every social feed was transfixed by one image. 3I Atlas hanging above the Pacific, pulsing like a second sun. Its glow had changed again, deeper now, tinted green at the edges, as though the light wasn't reflecting sunlight anymore but generating its own. The structure beneath the ocean had vanished from radar, but the water still shimmered in faint electromagnetic bursts. Military fleets patrolled the blackout zone, yet none dared to move closer. At 04:11 UTC, the pulses stopped. Total silence. Seismographs flatlined, magnetometers calmed, and the hum, the one millions claimed to feel in their bones, vanished. For a few seconds it felt as if the Earth had taken a breath. Then the light of 3 Atlas began to collapse inward. It wasn't fading, it was folding. Cameras captured the object's corona imploding into itself, like a lens reversing focus. Every spectrum detector went off scale, and then, slowly, 3I Atlas began to descend. No propulsion, no trail. It simply sank, lowering itself through the atmosphere in absolute silence. The air around it distorted, rippling like heat over asphalt. Witnesses from remote islands reported a soundless vibration that made glass crack. The descent lasted 11 minutes. When it reached the lower cloud layers, the object's outline became clear. No longer a diffuse sphere, but something with edges. Triangular, perfectly symmetrical. It hovered just above the ocean surface, directly over Point Nemo. The fleet surrounding the area opened communication channels, but no signal reached. Every transmission returned with a delay, as though time itself bent near the object. Then, a single beam of light shot downward. It wasn't a weapon, not heat or radiation, it was precision. The water beneath it parted like it was being drawn aside by invisible hands. Cameras on distant ships recorded a dark corridor forming beneath the waves, a straight vertical tunnel glowing faintly green along its walls. It reached deep, miles down, connecting surface and seafloor. Whatever was hidden beneath the ocean was being called up. Within minutes, seismic monitors detected movement from below. A slow ascending shift in mass, something huge rising through the crust. The water boiled, steam columns rising higher than storm clouds. Static flooded every frequency on Earth. People across continents heard faint whispers through speakers, even ones turned off. A layered sound, repeating something indistinguishable but rhythmic, almost human in tone. The government said nothing. The Vatican issued a single statement, non hominis opus, not the work of man. By dawn, 3I's Atlas was touching the atmosphere directly above the waves. Its lower surface opened like an iris, revealing a hollow core, a dark, spinning void surrounded by arcs of light. That's when power grids across the Pacific Rim went down. Entire cities, from Lima to Auckland, lost power simultaneously. Not from EMP, not from overload, but because the current reversed direction. Energy was being drawn out, not in. Satellites recorded magnetic field lines twisting toward the object, feeding it like veins. The beam intensified, and then, for the first time, sound. Not a hum, but a deep resonant tone echoing across the ocean, matching the pulse frequency from days before. It wasn't random, it was a countdown. "We're losing it," shouted one operator on the leaked feed from an Australian naval base. "The readings are converging. It's aligning with Earth's field core." But before anyone could react, the object beneath the ocean, the massive hidden structure, resurfaced. The sea split open, and an immense reflective mass broke through, casting waves for hundreds of miles. It was not a rock, it was metal, the same texture, the same geometric pattern seen on 3I Atlas. Two parts, one from the stars, one from beneath the Earth, were connecting, and as they did, something began to change in the sky. The auroras appeared at the equator. Green light spread across the atmosphere, shimmering like curtains in slow motion. Then, slowly, the stars above began to shift. Astronomers noticed the constellations themselves seemed displaced by fractions of a degree. The explanation was impossible. The Earth's rotation had slowed by 0.04 seconds per day. "Something is interacting with our planet's inertia," said Dr. Takuya Mori from JAXA. "It's like we're being caught in orbit around something invisible." Governments initiated global blackout protocols. Only a few independent observatories continued transmitting. One of them, located in Iceland, caught the final moments before total communication loss. The two objects, 3 Atlas and its counterpart from beneath the sea, merged into one structure. The fusion emitted a flash so bright it turned night into day across the Pacific. Instruments failed, satellites dropped offline. When power returned hours later, 3I Atlas was gone. No debris, no trace. Only a perfect circular storm remained where it had hovered, motionless, like a wound in the ocean. Then came the strangest part. Earth's magnetic north shifted exactly to that spot. Every compass, every sensor on the planet now pointed toward the empty Pacific. The magnetic pole had moved overnight. 3I Atlas hadn't destroyed anything. It had rewritten orientation itself. The question scientists feared most was no longer where it went, but what had taken its place. And deep in the silence that followed, instruments around the globe picked up one faint transmission from the void above the Pacific, a whisper buried in static, repeating endlessly on the same frequency as the pulse, synchronization complete.